I have one question from one of our board members, Ann Heller. She asks, Heather, she's curious about how you came up with the idea for the book. Has it been percolating for a long time? What exactly was your process?
Thank you, China. Thank you, China, for that really stirring rendition of that classic. Well, thanks for the question. I think the book, a lot of the themes of the book, the metaphor of the public pool, came while I was still working at Demos, as I was having cross-sectoral conversations with other progressive leaders trying to work on issues of labor organizing or climate change or healthcare, and really struggling to try to find a coherent story about what was holding us all back. Really struggling to make sense of the tension between what's often seen as sort of like the race left or the class left, right? The analysis that everything that is going wrong in our society and the creation of inequality has been because of, basically because of corporate power and economic policies, and then the race left seeing the world through a racial lens that talks about oppression and racial injustice, and how they were often sort of talking past each other or at cross purposes, or there wasn't sort of a fluid way to encapsulate the interplay between the issues of race and class. And so it was really born out of the struggle of trying to build a multiracial coalition, make sense of what was holding us all back. And then the moment of like, oh, this is the book, came to me when I was on the subway one day. And it was just sort of like it all kind of sank in as this is the framework where racism costs everyone. And then we were off to the races.
Thank you very much, Heather. This is a question directed to either Heather or Erasma, but I think Erasma would, I think you're going to jump in here, because the person wants to know about the landscape of tech accessibility in Brownsville, for example, and what is the experience of Power of Two during the COVID crisis, to keep families connected? And can you speak a little bit about those disparities? And I think this is a great opportunity to talk about the impact that Power of Two has had to jump in and do something.
Sure. So last year, right as lockdown was happening, the team and I decided that we really wanted to be able to pivot to tele-ABC. So that means a virtual platform to offering our program to families, because we knew that, our families have already been historically marginalized. We know that in communities like Brownsville, we have been segregated for decades. And we knew that the lockdown would have tremendous impact on the social, emotional well-being of both the child and the caregivers. And so we took it upon ourselves to conduct a survey of all of our families in Brownsville to get a real sense of the technology and the broadband accessibility. And what we found was it wasn't necessarily shocking, because we knew there was disparity and disproportionality in terms of access, but the breadth of it, the scope of it was astounding, where we had over 40% of the families in Brownsville lacking access to broadband. And so we decided that in order to buffer families, in order to ensure that they weren't internalizing all of the stress related to the pandemic, in addition to all of this, intergenerational systemic issues, we decided that we were going to commit to fundraising and make technology and broadband accessible. And so we fundraised all of April and May, and some of the folks that are here today helped with that. And we were able to provide our families with direct access to iPads and broadband so that they could not only engage in our programming, but also to make it possible for them to engage with other services, government services, agency services that had transitioned offline and hadn't really thought through how that would impact families that were most vulnerable.
Thank you, Erasma. So Heather, we have a couple of more questions directed to you, and it's maybe a little selfish question for us for Power of Two, but we really would like to hear from you as your history as a policy leader and activist and nonprofit leader. What advice would you have for Erasma and for us as supporters of Power of Two as we seek to expand our impact?
Well, you've already got, you know, the main ingredients of success, right? With a committed and visionary founder, a solid theory of change, a wonderful board that's obviously totally engaged and committed, a really urgent mission that also, you know, speaks to one of the most kind of deeply held human values, right? The love of children and the parent-child connection. So you know you guys are doing great already. I would say that, you know, the more that you're sort of constantly refreshing the well of people who are willing to advocate for the organization, reaching out and asking, you know, all the 115 people who were here at its peak, you know, to talk to two more people about Power of Two. The more that the people who are the beneficiaries of Power of Two can be, you know, their stories can be told in ways that we remember forever and that we can tell to other folks. That's so important. But it really, I don't have a ton of advice because it seems like so much of what you've done is really successful and working despite a lot of headwinds and struggles, particularly during these past 2 years.
Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you to everybody. And Erasma, thank you for such a wonderful conversation. I was going to ask you one more question, quick question that's burning, Heather, about, of course, the show that was referenced at the beginning of the of the program. People want to know, what are you most excited about regarding your forthcoming TV show?
I'm so glad you asked that because it's not a TV show, it's a podcast. You know, like
Okay.
podcasts all the time. The TV shows are so, you know, over. It's all about podcasts.
Okay.
So it's actually a podcast, although the Obamas did buy the film and television and podcast rights to the book. But right now, what we have definitely planned, and it'll be out on Spotify later in the year, is a podcast where I'm going to go around the country and revisit some of the solidarity dividend stories in the book, but also find more, you know, and I'm eager to hear other thoughts from you, Erasma, and from others about solidarity dividend stories of cross-racial organizing that came, you know, during the pandemic and all of these other moments, which have really, hopefully, it's a podcast that gives you a sense of the America that we're becoming and that we can be, and a sense of possibility. And so yeah, that's the, you know, I don't know if the Obamas are going to play any on tape role, but they're very excited apparently about the concept. So
Well, we're excited to hear it. So we'll be keeping our ears open. I certainly thank you so much for inspiring what everyone on this call can do individually to fill our pools to the deep end, and supporting this important work with Power of Two. And with that, I will say thank you and good night.